And we're back with another episode of Lateral Lawyers Podcast. Morning, Liam. How we doing?
Morning, mate. Well, thank you. How are you?
I'm great, but you're frozen. Oh, there you go. You're back with us.
Oh, don't worry about these things.
We don't worry about these things. Today, guys, we're going to talk about. I'm just going to bring up my emails. The habits of our. I just think Liam and I were just chatting the other day, and the lockdown gives everybody a chance, particularly business owners, and that's obviously who we relate to as business owners, to sit back and decompress a little bit, be out of the arena, so to speak, and think a little bit about working on your business rather than in it, and some of the things you've been doing or not doing, and empowering yourself to self improve, recover a little bit. And it just got us thinking that what are the traits of the people? I saw a great thing that my friend and colleague Luke Chemist from Next Advisory put somewhere on social saying, if you're looking to find your ideal clients, make a list of all your clients, then put a line through all the ones that you go when you get a phone call or an email from, and it's about opposites. And I thought that was a great bit of advice, and it got me thinking about some of the traits and characteristics of our better clients. So I thought we'd just rattle off some of those characteristics. So first of all, they're almost always really calm. Liam, you'll notice dealing with a really high cut of client at Lateral Lawyers that you never really feel flustered or stressed hearing from them. They listen to you, and there's a gap
No.
between, like, there's a gap between their reception of your advice and what they say next, and more importantly, what they do.
Yeah, definitely. They're very much not sort of the perturbed type of nature, and they're very much not trying to sort of rush about things. So they'll say their piece, but then they're happy to sort of then sit there and actually listen to what you have to say, and then kind of go back and forth without you sort of both trying to speak over each other, because they've just clearly well versed in the fact that that's the most sort of effective way to actually sort of navigate a conversation rather than sort of just this rapid spitfire exchange between everyone sort of talking on top of each other. So that's, yeah, whenever I'm in a meeting
They
or
haven't
on a phone
predetermined,
call. Yeah.
they haven't predetermined what they think, and are seeking advice just because it is, the thing to do. Have they? They're actually
No.
ringing you because they've got an idea of what to do, but they want the gaps to be filled in.
Yeah, because I mean, at the end of the day, most of them are very sophisticated parties. So it's just by them ringing us alone, it's clear that they are actually coming to us for advice. And obviously, sometimes you see some people are sort of starting to sort of chip in a little bit, and you're just like, well, what's really going on here? Are you going to listen to me? Because I mean, you're asking me for advice. So that's
I
what some
remember we
good
had
clients do.
a very good but previously quite difficult client a few years ago ring me, ask me for my advice, and then every time I tried to get a word in, he would cut me off, and that was part of his journey. And eventually, in the old
Mm,
days, I would have got, to use your word, Liam, perturbed by such an exchange, and would have
mm,
probably got a bit emotive and annoyed. But this time, I just calmly listened, and then when I finally got my chance to speak, I said, "Why did you call me?" And his response was,
mm,
"What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, why did you pick up the phone and call me?"
mm,
And then he didn't know what to say, and I said, "Presumably because you wanted my
mm,
advice." He
mm,
said, "Yes."
mm,
And I said, "Well, I tell you what, how about I give you my advice, and then what you do with that is up to you. But
mm.
what was the point in calling me if you're not going to listen at all?" And
Yeah.
that was a more conspicuous example where I really teased out that whole dynamic between a professional advisor and a business
Mm,
person.
mm, mm,
It's often more subtle than that, but yeah, they are calm and they are
mm,
listening for your advice. They don't always agree, and sometimes they want to know the full legal picture before they go and do what they were going to do anyway. That's
mm.
fine. Our job is not to over lawyer and make the decisions
Yeah.
for them, but we
Mm.
want to be able to give them enough information so that they can go out and make a decision with the full, um, a full dossier of
Yeah.
information and understanding of context
It's
at their
basically
disposal.
us setting out the parameters really, because I mean they're often going to be the one with the expert knowledge in their field. I mean they've been, all of our clients are all rather wide and varying in what they're good at, and I don't think either of us would profess to be savants in every single area ourselves. So definitely, it's us sort of putting up those legal, just as I said, parameters, and just saying, look, these are kind of your bowling alley lanes really, and you can sort of do whatever you want in here, but the rest is sort of up to you.
That's a really good way to put it. The bowling, you're setting the parameters of, what they should and shouldn't be doing in the
Mm,
context of, if you go outside of these bowling lanes, then
mm,
this will be the consequence for you. Sometimes the consequence is worth it, and as I think we were talking last night, Liam, about, I know it was actually a client of mine I was talking to. Often we are dealing with situations where we have ourselves imperfect information, so we don't know the
mm,
full extent. And we were dealing recently with a client and their family, and it turned out that because of the broader picture, some of the decision making was perhaps more well thought out than we originally envisaged,
mm,
due to the fact that we ourselves were
mm,
acting on, incomplete information. And
mm,
because of that, we would urge everybody, and this is what our better clients do, to give us
mm,
as much information as possible so that we can understand exactly why you're thinking of making the decision that you are. If you try
mm.
and deceive or just sort of omit key pieces of information and because you feel you're going to be judged, well, number one, you shouldn't be dealing with that lawyer and the other professional in the first place if you're feeling you're going to be judged, because that professional shouldn't be. It's not their place to judge you,
Yeah,
um, except for in the most extreme of circumstances. Um, but so it's not their place to judge you, and it is. They just need as much information as possible to be able to give you the best advice they can, and it really does depend on the minutiae of all the detail of that situation.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
Another thing I've written down is, okay, so there's space between their emotional reaction and their actual reaction. Well, I think we've covered that. They play the long game. So,
Mm,
and I've, as my journey as a business owner, as a human being, has progressed, I have in the past also been guilty of not playing the long game in certain situations. We're all human, we're all learning, and hopefully you are actually learning. Our clients have seen them go on similar journeys, same as you, Liam, going on a similar journey where
yep.
you've these really successful people in business. They have this extraordinary ability, and I don't think. I mean, some of us are a bit more predisposed towards it than others, but
Mm,
for most of us, including definitely myself, the ability to curve your emotional or animalistic reaction towards something, um, in the an issue that in favor of the long term approach. And it doesn't mean you're a walkover. Doesn't mean you let people
no.
just treat you however they want. There's got to be
Mm,
something in it for you, beyond just not disturbing the peace. At the same
mm,
time, you've got to look at every situation or every that you're in, not in so much of a transactional manner, but more
mm,
in the context of overall, is it really worth making an ordeal or an issue or a point out of something when
mm,
the bigger picture would say that it's not a good use of energy? And I see people all the
yeah,
time, sometimes clients of ours, when they're given a bit of advice and there's a real pause and they don't even say anything on the phone. And all I think to myself when I hear that,
yeah,
when I'm not hearing anything, they're processing what to do. They may not be over the moon about a certain bit of information or something that's happened to them, but they're able to quite quickly move on without the inefficiency or baggage of their emotions clouding what is actually the best thing to do.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think, yeah, it's definitely it does take something to. It's a skill that is required. I mean, at the end of the day, often humans are very emotive creatures, and we sort of like to feed into that. just because it's probably the most easiest sort of reaction to do is when something annoys you, you get annoyed, you know. But it's having that ability to actually sort of just put that to one side and just sort of think, okay, what is this reaction? What is the net result of this reaction going to be? And where if I actually just take the more neutral, might just sort of seethe for 5 seconds, but then sort of internalize that and say, actually, look, if I don't have to like it, but I can still just think about moving forward and actually looking down the line and saying, look, I'll swallow my pride, or I'll I hate it, but I'll put it to one side and just think, actually, in the next 6 months, this is actually still just probably going to work out better for me. And that could be things like, debtors. It would be a classic one. Sometimes a debtor might come to one of these clients and just say, look, I just can't pay you. And they're like, mate, I've given you so much sort of leniency already. But then sometimes it's just like, look, it does seem like they have the right idea. It does look like they might be financially on track. So although they've already been, putting me down the garden path the last year, I'll, do 6 more months, and then I'll actually end up being able to get, 90 cents on the dollar instead of, 15. So it's that making those sort of hard decisions, and not sort of being too driven by just sort of emotive reasoning all the time, because yeah, there's a lot to be gained for just sort of that neutral, steady-headed thinking and thinking in the future.
They're very good at applying the decision making on a principled rather than
Yeah,
um,
and pragmatic, and just it's rational. It's that rational mind, really, that says, like, look, it's this is reality here. It's that pragmatism that really sort of shines through, rather than that
they're
emotive
not.
kind of.
Yeah, it's not. And what we're saying here is they're able to um, see the wood from the trees, think of the bigger picture, and not react emotively if they don't get. They understand these successful business people that they're dealing with so many people in so many situations at any given time. They
Mm,
understand that they're not always going to. In fact, more often than not, almost always things don't go their way. But there's no point throwing
mm,
the kitchen sink at the person or the
mm,
situation, as an emotive knee-jerk reaction,
mm,
and in the misguided belief that it's actually going
mm,
to cause them to suddenly change what otherwise is not palatable to them. So what they
mm.
instead, but don't confuse that with them being soft or weak-kneed,
No,
because they can be
that's the problem.
ruthless and tough as well when they actually realize that there's an intent, or the person is just not being, like, for example, in your example, Liam, um, sentence there, for example, in your example. So in your example you just gave regarding a
Mm,
client with the debtors, if they know the person is going through some sort of cash flow crunch, they're fighting, battles on multiple fronts,
mm,
and they
mm,
know that that person genuinely doesn't have any cash and has competing debtors that they know need to stay afloat. Well, as a professional advisor, your best interests are for that person to get through to the other side, to the point that
mm,
it is actually optimal for them to pay you. I.e.,
mm,
if there's other people ahead of you, that depends on their very and if you have a
mm,
long-term relationship with someone in that
mm,
position, you need to exercise a degree of benevolence towards them if you want that
mm,
relationship to continue to grow. Having said that,
mm,
if you know that they're actually got other cash slushing around,
mm,
the classic one is you see on like Facebook or something that they've just gone to, well, not at the moment, but pre-COVID, Mallorca for the weekend, and you're like,
mm.
wait a minute, that jerk owes me 3 grand for the
Yeah,
last
yeah.
year. That starts to piss you
Mhm.
off. They
Yeah,
won't be necessarily benevolent or tolerant in that situation. They'll be
mm,
incredibly hard, ruthless,
yeah.
and tough.
And again, I guess
But yeah,
that's I guess
so
what the
it's a
word.
case by case thing, like you said, Liam. It's on a principled basis, and
Mm,
it's about considering the whole landscape.
yeah, definitely.
What were you saying?
Well, no, yeah, I was just about to say, and that's just what I think that sort of word, like, sort of pragmatism sort of allows, it's not always just sort of taking the, at least sort of from the outside looking weak approach kind of thing by not being hard. Sometimes it absolutely does require you to be, look, this is my one shot at this, or like you said, you've sort of seen a reason for to sort of go for the throat and just be like, look, I can do this, and this is going to be actually the right decision. But it does just require you having that quick internal look at actually surveying the field and saying this is the landscape I'm working with, and this is the best option.
Exactly. The last point we're going to just quickly touch on today is our really good clients, irrespective of what stage they're at, they value good advice and they're happy to pay for it. That doesn't mean, because the sort of people watching these videos are more likely to be people who have aspirations of being very successful. They haven't figured that mix out yet. You may be very young. You may have had a bit of bad luck. So to all the people out there watching, because it's easy to say, oh, you value good advice and you'll pay for it. Well, good advice is expensive. And if you don't have a lot of money at the time, how are you going to do that? Well, how you do that, if you're a younger person, you buddy up with someone like Liam up on K Road on Friday night at whatever in the
Haunt
establishment.
him at, yeah.
Haunty is the flavor of the month at the time, and you know he's a hotshot up and coming young lawyer, and you say, mate, I've just started some sort of crypto exchange or some sort of maybe flogging t-shirts off the back of a lorry. It doesn't matter, and you go, Liam, what sort of structure should I have for this? He'll probably, after his third or fourth salubrious cocktail of some description, chew your ear off back to you and give you more than you bargained for about how to set up all of that. All of a sudden, you're building a relationship with someone like Liam, and you're essentially mining him for a bit of free advice. Now, when you come and see us and need some stuff done formally, by that stage, you're probably in a position where you have made a little bit of money and you've seen already from that informal kind of advice or leg up that someone like Liam's given you that there is value in paying for that advice. It may not be at full rack rates at the time. If there's value, someone like Liam sees value in you and he's able to invest a bit of his own time without being paid much, or maybe being paid in some sort of contra, how to actually soft pedal that into a more formal relationship. Then along the line, what often happens to people is they see the value, but emotionally they don't understand what it feels like to not take heed of that type of advice. And what they then do is get burnt, and then they realize, shit, it's actually, even though that advice was going to cost me $3,000, it was actually better than the 12,000 I've just spent trying to get myself out of this freaking predicament because I didn't have a shareholders agreement in place. So my partner now is operating the bank account without me, and there's nothing under the Companies Act because he's a director, says he can't do that. And all of a sudden I'm in a worse position than I would have been from doing it properly. So we get a lot of clients coming to us and they want, say, a shareholders agreement, and they want very specific provisions in there because they've unfortunately been burnt in the past, and they need to, they've come to you with a specific problem in mind.
It's that classic sort of trip up of, sometimes the shortcut's the long way around sort of thing. You're like, money is tight, so I'll just sort of go for, just the cheaper alternative or something like that. And then more often than not, I would actually say, it comes back to sort of haunt you. And I think it's just that, yes, it hurts, but to sort of cough up for sometimes big legal fees like, shareholders agreements, they can be quite complex, especially if there's a lot of negotiations back and forth. The numbers can get up there. But in the long run, I think it really does sort of pay dividends. And I mean, like you said, there's actually a whole lot of workarounds, whether they be reduced rates or, like you said, other contra, or, even sort of could be taking shares in the startup company instead of the actual fee itself or something like that. There's actually
the whole idea of transfer of value or consideration for services rendered needs to be viewed in the long game, bigger picture sense as well, because you're not going to start offering lower than
what we were saying before.
Yeah, you're not going to start offering lower rates or some sort of unusual kind of questionable consideration for services rendered if you don't see value in that relationship in the long run, the same way that as from the client's point of view, if you don't see value in that professional advisor's ability and their counsel, you're not going to invest in them either in any way. So that is a workaround.
Mm.
And some of our really successful clients have grown with us over time. They're happy to pay you, more, full rates, and they'll spend quite a lot of money with you because they've seen the value of your service over time. But early on, that is more of a challenge, but it's a challenge for client and lawyer alike, and any business person. It's just the context that we're in as law. For any sort of situation, if you like and trust them all of a sudden, the ease and the lack of friction of handing over that money because you're not being fucked is actually a really important thing to be dealing with. A business partner of mine the other day dealing with something a little bit sensitive, and it's like it's a real challenge to actually deal with situations which affect trust. So it's really important that you establish that early on, and it's not always about money, it's about the relationship. Just have one question come in. James Ashwin, I have a biz idea around selling deflationary business cards. And I'll confess, I've been eyeing that question up for the last 3 or 4 minutes, James. And look, one idea I've got for you is what we in the hobby or basketball card collecting community call a RAS. Now, what a RAS is you go on eBay and you check out comps for your card, then you go on a page like the NZNBA sports cards page, and you put your whatever Luka Doncic rookie card up for a RAS, and then you fill, say, 20 spots at $10 each, and you hope that 20 punters come in and pay $10 each for your Luka Doncic card. So if you're at your wit's end and you're sitting on some basketball cards or any asset for that matter that's lost a lot of value, don't know how you do it with a car, but it definitely works with something like a basketball card. I suggest you go out there, James, and try and RAS your basketball cards. And then we just had a follow-up. Do we need a shareholders agreement for this? Yeah, it would be preferable. Maybe you could give us the cards. We'll RAS them, and then whatever's left from the fees, we'll donate to charity. Right. That was until then. That was quite a valuable session. Thanks, James, for your input. It's valued
always,
as always. We'll be charging you for this time as well.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. He said, "Thank you. That's great. How's your stomach?"
We live to serve.
We live to serve. All right, team. I'm going to wrap that one up today. Great to have some viewership. Good to chat basketball cards, and we will see you for another edition. Same bat time, same bat place tomorrow. Cheers.
Awesome. Cheers.